I'm tinkering about with batteries this week and maybe point out a few things that you hadn't realised. Welcome to Ralph's house. Yes, welcome back. I can't remember which episode of Ralph's House it was, but I bought this. I remember it was about £14, and it's an alkaline battery charger because, according to the specs on this, and I would think it would depend on the type of battery you'd got. I don't think I'd bother with the very cheapest batteries, but it is possible to charge alkaline batteries up to 10 times, which seems a phenomenal amount, doesn't it? I would assume that over a period of time, not so much their capacity, but their longevity depreciates. But having said that, I've managed to charge up alkaline batteries up to 4 or 5 times, no problem. I don't really like pushing it up to 10, particularly if it's something that's crucial, like a smoke detector or something like that. But yeah, it works all right. The only thing is, it doesn't do these C cells, and I've come across something that needs C cells, and the only ones I could find are ones that were in a bin, literally, that have just expired. They're just no longer their original voltage. But to enable me to charge them, this is why I have these little crop clips on leads, and I've already charged that one. That one's fully charged. I'm working on that one. It'll gradually go up to 3 sections and then it's fully charged. But what you may not know, let's put these batteries close together. I don't know the best way to do this. If I hold them side to side, you'll notice they are a similar height. In fact, they are an identical height. And it is possible, because I've just ordered some, you can buy a C, that's an AA, right? That's a C cell, but you can buy a case that will allow you to slip an AA into the case, and then the battery then becomes a C cell. Well, you'd think, well, why would you do that? Because surely the AA is smaller than the C cell. Well, not so much with rechargeables, because rechargeables have got quite a kick to them, compared to an alkaline battery. So with a C cell case and a rechargeable AA in it, you've effectively got a C cell battery, which saves you a lot of money, because even if you buy, let's say you buy a couple of C cell batteries, you're looking at about between £3 and £5 for 2 batteries now. It's outrageous, isn't it? And up to about, well, if you get about 4, you could be paying as much as 12 quid. I've seen them. But if you get into rechargeables, then it really gets silly, because it's like 6 or 7 quid each. So it makes perfect sense to order C-cell cases, which at most are 4 quid, and then you can use them many, many, many times with ordinary AAs in it. But that's what I'm doing at the moment, charging up C-cell batteries with a battery charger that's really aimed at AAs. I think what I might do at some point when I'm not using this is drill this out and hook into the circuit 2 C-cell compartments, so at least I can charge a couple of C-cells if I need to. Yeah, this is good. I know at work, which shall remain nameless, they go through an awful lot of batteries, and I suggested this. Well, why don't we just recharge them? And of course, well, you can't. You just bin them. No, you can recharge them. In the same way, even though it's different chemistry, these disposable vapes that people just discard in the street, hopefully that will ease up with the new regulations. But disposable vapes have batteries in them that are rechargeable. Absolutely, they're rechargeable. They've only been charged once. And the only reason they are not rechargeable is it was cheaper to produce the vape without the extra circuitry. And you're only talking 2 or 3 quid. if that. Well, maybe maybe £1.50 if they're doing them in bulk. A little charge circuit for charging up the batteries, but to keep the price down by £1.50, they left them out. So consequently, we've got perfectly good batteries littering everywhere that you can, reuse in other things. It's worth thinking about all this with batteries. So if you do have something with C cells in it, don't bother, because they're really expensive. Just buy the cases, and this is what they look like, and you just slip your AA battery into that and put it in whatever you need the C cells in it. They also do them for D cells, which are bigger than these. Anyway, just thought I'd mention all that as we get into episode, what are we here? 202. Someone said, well, you've done 200 episodes, Rouse. Why didn't you do a special one for 200? Well, I'm not going to. I'm going to do it for the 250th. That seems like more of a mark. And there are a few amusing moments in there that we can go back and reflect on. Anyway, that's enough on batteries. Right, a little update on the diesel heater, because friends have been asking me about this, and why I've got one in bits on the freezer. No, it hasn't broken down. I'll explain. I bought two. This is the one that I'm running. Currently, in front of that hose there, it's about 32 degrees, which is quite warm. Actually, my son will often sit down there in front of that if he wants to get really warm. But as an average, because I was looking at ways of trying to duck the heat more around the house, because obviously I've got mine mounted at the far end of the kitchen, which is fine, and on a cold evening like tonight, or whatever it is, I think it's about 7 degrees, probably less now, I haven't checked recently, but it has been in the minus figures over recent weeks, and we have not been cold, I can tell you, and this is a lot cheaper than running gas, I can tell you. But there are a few caveats with it, or things you might like to consider, and also my plans for the whole thing. Well, as far as taking the heater apart, that was really easy, very simple to strip down one of these and resurface it, providing that you've got decent gaskets. If you damage a gasket, you must replace it. What you don't want is carbon monoxide in your house, and I did invest, and it was one of the cheaper ones. I think it was about £35, a proper carbon monoxide tester, not the sort that you've got on the wall, which has got potentially a long delay on it, anything from an hour to several hours before it actually gives you a decent figure. But I've got one that will read it on the fly. With a couple of minutes it'll give me the readings, and I'm happy to say that is emitting no carbon monoxide, certainly not in here anyway, and minimal outside, so obviously it's burning fairly efficiently. Right, so why have I taken this heater apart? Well, this was the first one I put in, and what I wanted to see is, because I had at one point run it on veg oil, not waste veg oil, virgin veg oil, just really as an experiment to see if it would run on it. Obviously oil, waste oil, is much more viscous than diesel or kerosene, so it helps if it's warm. So my plan is, this is the original case and everything will all go back in it, but what I was going to do is the tank that sits at the top there, I was going to use for filtered waste veg oil only, and have a tap so that you can switch between neat kerosene or diesel or waste veg oil. Now the thing with these things, you're not going to start these up on waste veg oil. You need to start it up on kerosene or diesel, and likewise when you come to shut it down, you must run kerosene or diesel for the last 10 minutes just to clear out all the lines and burn off any carbon that's in the burn chamber. And this is the burn chamber. This is what produces all the heat. Now I'm pleased to say that despite the fact I've run it on veg oil, that's pretty clean in there. But that's what I wanted to know, you see. So this is a heater all stripped down. I'm not going to tell you how to strip one down or reassemble them. There are so many videos online telling you how to do that, so I really don't need to cover it. But it's just interesting that looking at all the elements of a diesel heater, there's not a lot to it. The main thing is fuel delivery and a glow plug that you'd find on a normal diesel engine. So as the kerosene or the diesel starts to get pumped through, and you hear that tick, 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 that's the pump on that one. That's about as noisy as it gets. And this thing heats up when the heater first starts, draws about 10 amps, and that glows cherry red. Well, it goes white actually, and that's what starts the ignition, or the initial cycle, if you like, of burning your diesel, kerosene or waste veg oil. And these are about £11 if you ever have to replace one. They're not an enormous amount of money. Pumps between £15 and £20, and you can buy all the gaskets. You can even buy a new burn chamber, and I do have one. I bought a spare one, kind of thinking ahead. So it isn't just the initial outlay. There are one or two things that you have to consider. It comes with some awful fuel hose. That's this stuff, this soft green stuff, which I will be replacing with this hard line stuff, and proper fuel clips, that sort of stuff, so everything's tidy. But once I've assembled everything, I'm going to put a tap on the back that you can switch between kerosene or diesel or waste veg oil. So when the thing's up to temperature, you just switch over to veg oil, and depending on what you pay for the veg oil, I think currently it's about, if you buy it, it's about 10 pence a litre, something like that, maybe slightly more now. But a lot of places don't throw it out, they sell it, and companies come and fetch it. You must have seen the lorries picking these things up from restaurants, places like that. Now this container here, this was the first lot of kerosene that I bought. Now kerosene is more expensive than diesel at the moment. It's about £1.90 a litre. So 20 litres, you know, it came to about 34 quid. Well, most of this I've still got half of it left, but I've actually filled it up again using diesel, which is about 160 something, isn't it, a litre. And I literally just unscrew this and decant it. But what I have done is I've fitted this on one side. Now on the end of this is a steel tube that goes all the way to the bottom, with just a small space at the bottom so it doesn't suck up too much muck. However, having said that, anywhere I've got fuel coming in, I always put a filter on it, because what you don't want is little bits and you know, debris going through your pump, because it can, you know, foul your pump up and cause it to stop. So to that I connect a small piece of rubber hose with a clip round it, and then feed this into the end of the rubber hose, and that gets fed in. This is going outside, it's actually going in my shed, and will be coming, because I've got a couple of holes down there that I can use. My shed backs onto this wall, you see, and I can keep that in the shed, and then when I want to top it up, all I've got to do is unscrew that, fill it up, and I can see exactly that's the present level at the moment. It's not right to the top, I wouldn't want to go any higher, but it gives me an idea of how much fuel I've got left, so I can always go and nip out of the shed, just see how much fuel I've got left. Or if I wanted to, I guess I could fit, because I've got plenty of CCTV cameras, I could train it on that and it would tell me how much fuel, so I don't even have to go out in the cold to check. So that's what I'm going to do. Predominantly it will be running on that, and then when it's up to temperature, and if I've got any, I'll run it on waste veg oil. Now, the thing with veg oil is, particularly waste veg oil, is you do have to filter it, and because it's quite thick, it takes quite a while to go through the filter. You can use coffee filters, that sort of stuff. I think you need to filter something like 10 microns initially, or even through a sieve, just to get rid of all the big stuff, and then gradually down to 1 micron. But it's a slow process. It'll probably take about a week, you know, to fill that little tank that I've got. But that's fine, I'm not in a hurry, I can wait for it, and I've got kerosene and diesel. Bear in mind this heater is very cheap to run anyway. But that's kind of where I am with this, and I decided to reuse this container by putting this pipe all the way down to the bottom, so I can just pull all my kerosene and or whatever I've got in there. It's a mix at the moment. It's a mixture of kerosene and diesel and a little bit of veg oil. I'd say it's about 20% veg oil. The rest is all kerosene and diesel, and it'll be fine on 20%, even 30%, and it will burn very, very clean, providing you've got it all set up. But as I say, very important that you get a carbon monoxide tester so that you know everything's safe. I mean, after all, when a guy comes in and fits your boiler, he'll be checking for all of that stuff when he commissions it, and what goes out is also important, because if the levels are all wrong, then the boiler's not burning correctly and is not running efficiently. And the idea is to get this running as efficiently as you can. And there are little tweaks you can do to the pump, that sort of stuff. I'm not going to get technical on you, but what I would say is this is presently saving me an absolute fortune. The only thing I find with these diesel heaters, and I don't know whether it's common to other people, is it's really hard to, if you turn it off and then try and restart it when it's warm, it doesn't generally want to fire up. It likes to cool right down. And actually that seems right, because when this thing's running, the burn chamber gets incredibly hot. That's why you couldn't just disconnect the power to it, because it's going to get very hot in there and potentially bake any electronic components. So very important that it goes down through its cool cycle and cools slowly. But I've had this running at the moment for 2-3 days non-stop. It's a little awkward because at the moment I have to take the top off that, that's the little tank inside that one, to top it up with a funnel, and in a small space like that it's inevitable you're going to spill a bit, and you only need a trace of kerosene or diesel and you'll smell it. So that's why I'm putting this out in the shed with a fuel line that comes through the wall and then goes to a petrol tap. Say when it's up to temperature it'll run fine on cooking oil, but it won't from cold. But obviously once you get over to cooking oil, it's really, really cheap to run. It's ridiculous. So what's happened to me gas boiler? Well, it cost me about £5.5 grand when I first moved in here, because my father had a back boiler which was not very efficient, and so it was decided, not by me I hasten to add, that we just need to get a new boiler in, and I'm glad I did. But what I would say is at the moment my gas boiler is, it's turned on because I can use it for hot water, but it's not turned on for the heating at the moment. Sorry if I've got any flicker on this thing, it's because of the lighting I'm using. Yeah, so I've turned the gas boiler off, but the way this works is at the moment it's about 32 to 35 in front of this heater, and on this floor generally it's about 25 in the hallway, and I keep my doors open so the heat moves up the stairs, and it's about 20 to 22 in there in the evenings. Depends, if we've opened the door at any point and gone outside, the temperature drops rapidly, especially if it's a freezing cold night. But providing all your doors are shut, and I do have double glazing in here, and I've made sure there's no gaps anywhere, so it's as efficient as it can be for a 1930s house. It is a cavity wall in places, but there's no insulation in that, so I may consider in the longer term, although it's quite expensive, is using a proper insulating lining paper on the walls, which would again, help reduce the cost of heat. So that's why I've got my boiler all stripped down, because I need heat in the meantime. But I'm going to put all this one together, put a two-way petrol tap, which will probably be a couple of weeks before that comes in, and then I'll literally take that one out and put this one in, ready to connect up to all the relevant fuel tanks. But otherwise, yeah, it's worked great, and you don't have to mount it outside, you don't have to listen to that at all. You could mount it outside, but the only thing is you're going to have to cut reasonably large holes, I think they're about 85mm across, through your outside wall and bring in heat in. Rather than do that, I'm keeping the heater in here, it works for me, but I'll keep the fuel, at least the diesel and the kerosene, outside, so I don't get the smells of that indoors at all. And then I'll just keep a container at this end of the kitchen, which is for waste veg oil, So if you get any, not that I use a lot of oil, I tend to use olive oil, but that's fine, that will burn in there as well. And all I'll use that little tank for is just for the oil, and then I can switch over to kerosene. I can just run diesel and kerosene all the time if I want, or if I've suddenly got some oil when the heater's hot, I can switch it over. So that's kind of where we are. As you know, I've been having to work on this corner principally so I could get this freezer pushed into this corner and get my heater in place, so I don't have to mess at the end of this kitchen. I've still got the rest of the kitchen to do, a good deal of it. But as with everything in Ralph's house, as soon as I get a wall clear and flat, I always paint it white. And then if I want to later on, I can wallpaper, I can do whatever I want with it. I am going to put in a shelf over the weekend over here. I found a piece of mahogany. It's not the ideal colour for this end, but it's the widest, flattest board, and it came out of my late mother's garage. It was my stepfather's, and I thought, oh, that's handy, really long board, and it'll go across there. And I want to keep all my plates and things that I don't use very often, like I don't know, my food mix, that sort of stuff. So it's down this end of the kitchen. If we need a plate, it's no bother to come down here and get it. And when I lift the lid on that, that's not going to get in the way. As for the kitchen maid, as you know, if you watched last week, I had to mount it on this piece of wood that's the other side of this beam, because I can't drill into this part of the ceiling because it's reinforced concrete. But a guy at work who's doing some, well, he's a subcontractor, lent me an SDS drill bit that he said that should do it. You should be able to get in with that, and I do have an SDS drill. So all I've got to do is pick up the SDS drill, and then I can drill it, and I can move this where I want it. I really want it that side of the beam. It doesn't get in my way. I mean, I clear it, but I just think it would look tidier. It would disappear behind the beam when it's cranked up. So that's where we are, and that's the time, and it's on a Friday afternoon. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.